Welcome to the last video in this Continual Improvement Awareness series. This is like a white belt type of program, very brief introduction to get you engaged in thinking about what improvement means and how it fits in the context of organizations as a whole. This one is titled Learning to Chase Answers in the Data. Now, what we see here is that Einstein made a comment. He said, problems cannot be solved using the same blunt instruments that created them. And so it's now time to sharpen your blunt instruments. Most of the analysis tools that we've learned in school are actually the blunt instruments. They are things like hypothesis testing and so forth. And these types of tools actually have become obsoleted by the changes that are happening in technology and the advances that have happened in scientific decision-making, most notably artificial intelligence and machine learning, but also in just some of the very basic way we look at things, because we have this automated world that we're living in. So think about the difference. Change means something doing something in a way that's different from what you did before. So it says anything I did that's different is change. Improvement means we're doing something better than we did before. And so I once saw a quotation that I particularly liked. It says, let's learn to make better mistakes. Not the same mistakes, but better mistakes than we had in the past. So how do you judge if different is actually better? And what that means is we have to question, where is the improvement coming from? Is it happening inside ourselves, or is it being forced upon us by outside forces? So the best improvements is that which is internally motivated. It's based on observations we make using data, using analysis methods that help us to understand where our weaknesses are and what needs to be done to correct them. So we have to standardize across cycles of learning. So we see a standard is a documentation of the best way or a best practice that we've observed through the study of work in different environments. And we understand this way is best because we've measured it and we can make the comparison. And that means we've measured it in the same way. To ratchet means to hold the gains. So just like a ratchet wrench holds, if you will, the torque before you bring it back to apply pressure. And so this is the exact word that the Japanese use in their control systems. So don't revert to the same old way, but ratchet up to the new way of doing things. So don't go back or fall back, if you will, on our laurels and say, we've been doing things the same old way. That way was okay. Let's not try this new way of doing things. But that's make a conscientious effort to continue pushing forward and using the new methods. Improvement is change for the better. So Kaizen means change for the better. Its alternative is Kai-Aku. Kai-Aku means change for the worst. And so what we see in Kaizen, it's a process of studying work and identifying what is that best way or best practice, documenting that process then as a new standard so we can duplicate it and apply it and replicate it repeatedly throughout the organization wherever that process is occurring. And then control is the final state that we have here. Control is when we get this new process totally converted and we want to maintain the consistent performance so everyone is achieving the same degree of consistency. Variation in the outcome within each person doing the job and each performance of the job is such that there is an acceptable zone of minimal variation that we can tolerate, and the performance results will be what we need them to be. So how does the work process improve over time? Well, we see that there are 3 cycles of learning that we go through. In the first one, it's out of control. In other words, the performance is up and down, up and down. There is no control, nothing that we can really count on because nothing is even at the average. And then we see we have eliminated the highs and the lows and we stabilize the process. This is what happens when we get rid of special causes of variation. And when we find out what is it that affects the whole system, we can move it to a higher level of performance. And this is what happens when we can have improvement cycles happening. And so the idea that we have is the outcome of, if you will, standard work over time and a continual improvement process with cycles of learning is that the system produces results that are predictable with a high probability of success. And so we see there's dedicated action, and the ratcheting up is seen as we move to these higher levels, and then we sustain performance in a tighter band of variation, and again we ratchet up to a third level. And so understanding the requirements can lead to this stabilization, and then making sure that we actually follow through is what we would like to have be that motivator for the people who are working in the process as they self-regulate the management of that work. Now what we see is that the cycles of learning in Six Sigma, we have two different models. One is called DMAIC, which stands for Define, Measure, Analyze, Improve, Control, and we use that for structured problem solving. So we're going to follow a process and we'll apply tools that are appropriate for the data that we have to make sure that we get a result that is in a state of control. If we're going to be needing to create a new process or to create a new program, we can use what's called DMADV. DMA, Define, Measure, Analyze, then Design and Verify. And this is what we use to develop products or processes. So whether it's business processes or hard products or service designs, that's the process we would use. So they're built on a continual improvement approach to project management, which is the Japanese PDCA model, which is applied in Gemba 2 improvement activities. A few years back in 2014, the International Academy for Quality designed a generic continual improvement process model that can be used by all disciplines. So production systems engineering, quality management, information technology, accounting. And it integrates the SDCA and PDCA model in a single framework. And so we have this improvement triangle, Gemba 1, Gemba 2, Gemba 3. The base of that triangle is the standards of the organization. So that's control. And then the continual improvement process has 7 steps. It goes through first characterize, which is how we understand the situation and the gaps. Then we investigate the gaps. We explore what are the reasons for those gaps. We then solve the problems. What can we do to eliminate the gaps that we've observed? And then we evaluate the alternatives. We implement the chosen alternatives, and then we put it into the SDCA cycle to monitor in the daily management process. And then that will feed back into the characterize step when we see out of control conditions exist. So the continual improvement process is a thinking process to pull observations into data, and it demonstrates causality and improves the way that people work. When we take a look at this process, we see that it's asking a question, if you will, and say, what common elements do all continual improvement models contain? And so the study done by the International Academy for Quality says, this is what we have to have in our model. So characterize is identifying the opportunity, then defining and specifying the scope of the project. Investigate is evaluating the facts to find the boundary constraints that limit an opportunity. So where are we actually structuring this improvement project focus? Explore is understanding the nature of the opportunity to improve. Solve is the alternatives to improve the process and how well they are. Evaluate is the understanding the efficacy of the potential solutions. Implement is develop the plans to capture the benefits and then actually implementing those and capturing the benefits. And monitor is observing the process and auditing it for consistent performance while it's in standard operations. When we take a look at how these different models work together, we see that here is the Plan, Do, Check, Act model. Here is the extended DMAIC process, which starts with recognize, which is strategic alignment, and ends with standardize, which is where we change the process into standard work throughout the organization. And we see that in this tiered process here, this is the continual improvement process. Characterize is something that's done by the management team. That's the strategic actions. We go into define, so that define measure is investigate. Explore is measure, analyze. Then solve is part of improve. Evaluate is part of improve. Control and standardize or implement. And then monitor, which is what's done by the work team engaged in the process. And so we see there are different questions that we can have for each of these different 7 processes, and also many different activities that can be followed. We'll come back and talk to those as appropriate in our black belt level training, where we're talking about how to actually do the detailed analysis. And I want to end with kind of a challenge, if you will, some quotations from Yoda, the Grand Master Jedi Knight. And when we're pursuing a learning journey, Yoda said, you want to know the difference between a master and a beginner? The master has failed more times than the beginner has tried. Arduous is discovering oneself, going on the greatest exploration it is. You must unlearn what you have learned. And when we start thinking about it, many times we will have to unlearn things we've learned. If we've learned about lean from Wikipedia or by Googling, we probably will find that there are many things that we have put into our minds that do not actually follow what needs to be done. If you're interested in understanding more about this, I would ask that you take a look at the next series where we're talking about an orientation to the improvement methodology. It's more detailed, it's several hours long, and it will give you that level which takes you up to what you might call a yellow belt level introduction to the topic. Thank you very much.